Hi there. My name is Liz Moffat and I am, amongst other things, a breathwork meditation guide or facilitator, a human-centered designer, a Reiki practitioner and a recreational athlete. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. I'm on Wurundjeri and Bunurong land. And I help people all over the world turn good ideas into great ideas through human-centered design and design thinking. And in my breathwork world, I help people feel their feelings. And today I'd like to talk to you about design thinking and human-centered design. Human-centered design, or HCD, is a framework or an approach for designing products or systems. Rooted within the HCD framework, design thinking is it's a practical, collaborative and iterative approach to understanding and solving problems. So it's about bringing people together, the people that are involved in solving the problem directly and indirectly, and then also including the people who have the problem that you're trying to fix or trying to work on. And it's iterative, so it means you take a little step forward, test and see if it works, and if it does, take another step forward. If it doesn't, you change something, and then you test again. And the other thing about design thinking and HCD is they believe that innovation occurs at the intersection of user needs, available technology, and business requirements. And that just basically means that it considers all of those three things. So it thinks about user needs, it thinks about requirements, limitations, and it thinks about business needs, so making money. And sometimes those things, I'll show you a diagram by the power of technology, sometimes those three lenses are called desirability, viability, and feasibility. And you want to aim to get to that little sweet spot in the middle where they all overlap, where everyone's needs are met and all of those concerns are addressed. With human-centered design, we always start with the person that we're designing for. We always go back to source. And sometimes we do that in person. So sometimes that means interviews or observations. And sometimes that's done through looking at existing research, because depending what you're talking to people about, it can be either really annoying or quite traumatic for people to have to tell their story over and over. In human-centered design, we don't assume that we know anything. We always go back. We start with watching and listening, and from there we learn. As I'm talking today, you might hear me use a phrase, the people that we are designing for. And that just means the people who have the problem that you want to solve, the people who might use your product or your service. So just to come back to that Venn diagram that we looked at briefly before, we're going to spend a little bit more time looking at that now. And human-centered design tells us that in order to get to a solid solution, we have to consider these three lenses, so desirability, viability, and feasibility, and aim for that sweet spot of overlap, of intersection in the middle. And it's really important that you start with desirability, because it doesn't matter how great you think something is, if it doesn't fulfill a real need, people won't want it, or they'll buy it and they'll never use it, and that's not great for your brand. It has to be something that people want and something that meets a real need for them. So that going back to the beginning, that watching, that listening and that learning, that's where that comes in right now with desirability. And feasibility, so that's looking at what your technical constraints are, your legal constraints, your legislative constraints, the environmental constraints. It's looking at all of those and seeing what's possible. And finally, we have viability. And this can often come down to the bottom line, also known as money. So how is somebody, if the person who's making the solution, how are they going to make money from the solution, or how are they going to save money? So start with desirability. Do people want it? Will it solve a real problem that they actually have? Now, you can have a great idea, something that you personally think is brilliant, and it may fit the other two lenses of viability and feasibility, but if it's not solving an actual need or something that people really want, then it probably won't be successful. So remember, always start with the need. Then you can layer the other two, viability and feasibility, on top, and then you get to the middle. As you start to explore human-centered design and design thinking, you may come across this. It's called the double diamond. You might see slightly different versions with slightly different wording on, but they're all in the essence, they're all the same in essence. So you start at the beginning and you start with the people that you're designing for, and then you look to understand them in their context, look to understand them in their world. So you go really wide. It's called divergent thinking. So understanding all that there is to know about the person, about the world, about the context that's relevant to the problem that you want to solve for. And then you start to understand their deeper needs. Once you're there, you then start to focus in, so you converge, the convergent thinking, until you get a crystal clear idea or a crystal clear point as to what that common problem is, what that common need is amongst your audience, amongst the people that you're solving for. From there, you go wide again with divergent thinking, and you ideate, you create, you come up with lots of ideas and creative ways to solve that problem. Then you narrow back in again, and you start to build a prototype. So prototypes can be really basic. They can just be like a sketch of your ideas on a piece of paper. They can be a model. They can be post-its on the wall behind you. But it's something that helps you get your idea across to somebody and lets them test it, have a go, have a think about it, and give you some feedback on what works and what doesn't. And from there, you iterate, you change your idea, and then you test it again. And the thing that I like most about human-centered design and design thinking, well, actually, there's lots of things that I particularly enjoy about them. I enjoy the fact that you don't fail, you learn. I enjoy the fact that you get to explore ideas. I guess the thing that I appreciate the most is that it has people at its core, and it has empathy. It's around being empathetic for the person that you're solving for, the person that has that need or that problem that you want to work with and fix or change, and understanding their world. And then testing the solution, like having them involved as you build that solution and test it and tell you if it works. So rather than going, tell me your problem, and coming back and going, I have the answer, I've solved it for you, it might not be quite right. You might not have fully understood. So really bringing that person into what you're doing and testing your idea before it's anywhere near finished, it's a really inclusive way of solving problems. And that's one of the reasons that I appreciate it. And just to really give you some colour around the context and the importance of context, I'm going to tell you my favourite way of explaining this. And it's a bit silly, but I think it works. So imagine there's somebody who says, I'm really hot. And their friend says, I'll bring you a glass of water. So the friend goes away, comes back, gives them a glass of water. First person drinks a glass of water. The friend says, how do you feel now? The first person says, yeah, I'm still pretty warm. So the friend goes, I'll get you another glass of water. So they go away, get a bigger glass of water. This one's got more ice in it, and come back, and the first person drinks it, and they're like, I'm still warm. If you're looking at someone's context, you don't just look at the fact that they're warm, you kind of zoom out a bit. So in this example, you zoom out on the person who's saying that they're warm, and you see, oh, you're warm because you're in a sauna. Okay, now I have a different solution to your problem. That difference in context, rather than going, you're warm, hey, I fixed your problem, have some water, is looking that little bit wider and going, you're warm, oh, you're in a sauna. Okay, so I can bring you all the water in the world and you're probably not going to cool down. What I actually need to do is take you out of the sauna. So, as I said, it's a little bit silly and probably quite unrealistic, but I think it works really well to illustrate the importance of context. And context is so important when you're solving a problem with somebody. If you're thinking of solving a problem around healthful eating, it might be that the person that you're solving with, the person that you're talking to, it might be that they don't go grocery shopping in the household. It might be that somebody else makes the choices as to what food comes into the household. It might be that they live in a food desert and there is no fresh food available to them. There's no vegetables, there's no fruit. There's other things that are factors that are at play that are going on there. So it is really important to understand that context, to have empathy for the person rather than just assuming that you know the answer to their problem. And that's, as I said, that's one of the reasons why I really like human-centered design, because it has those creative ways of solving problems, and it's about being now with the person that you're trying to help. So that is a very, very brief introduction to human-centered design and to design thinking. There is a whole lot more. That's kind of like the top tip of the iceberg, but I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions, then drop me a line, and happy exploring with whatever it is that you're exploring.